I do. It's over here off to the side. But I'll be using the Stanville brown. And I like to start mine right behind the eye of the hook. I'll come down part way. We'll use some pheasant tail fibers. 3 to 5 fibers depending upon the size, and I didn't count them, so I just pulled some out. I pull the feathers out directly from the stem or the rachis, and that will align those ends, and then pull the feather away. And I don't like it a full body length, so I want it a little bit less than that, but to each their own. Make a soft wrap, and I'll hold the fibers up as I go towards the final tie-in point, where I'll stop right above the point of the hook, and you can clip that or just pull it off. So I mentioned I've got brassy copper wire, and I've already got it in my hackle pliers so I can grab a hold of it. I'm going to reverse wrap this wire, so normally I tie the wire away from me, and I will tie it close to me. I'll make a couple of wraps, and you'll notice that I have the wire ending right around the thorax area. So a lot of my fly tying, I like to manage the diameter of the body, and I'll use those fibers or whatever I'm tying in to help build that up. I will tie in a few fibers of probably around 8 fibers, somewhere in there, so I'll do the same technique. This time I'll tie them in by the tips, but I will trim that just a little bit. And you'll notice I'll tie that in so I don't have to trim the fibers. And I'll just take touching turns as I move forward. Wrap away from me. When it gets difficult, you can either grab your hackle pliers or just use your finger to hold it, push it around. And I will tie it off. I use 3 wraps and then 1 in front, so if I do bump the bobbin holder, everything doesn't unravel. We'll trim the extra. And now, as I begin to wrap, I will go I'll counter wrap those fibers, so not if, but when a fish's tooth hits that, it will not unravel all of those pheasant fibers. And 4 or 5 wraps, I like 5. I'll place that 1 wrap back, make a wrap around the wire. And again, I'll make 1 wrap in front, and I will hold tight, and now I'll helicopter and that will get a nice clean break. Now generally I would use a peacock eye because I really like the quality of the peacock, but I'm out of peacock eyes. And so I have some strung hackle, strung peacock herl, which is okay. It's not the best, but you know what? It will do. So I've got 5 fibers here. Kind of align the tips somewhat, and I will trim those. And I'll make a soft wrap and tighten it down, and then I'll start making just a wrap around. Around the hook. I use those 3 turns and 1 in front and trim. Now for the hackle, we'll use a nice Hungarian partridge. And so this is a skin, and I like the fibers that are right behind the head. This would be the head. So I love this color of hackle. So I pull one of those off, and it looks like this. So I'll hold onto the tip of the feather, and we'll pull out some of these fibers. Okay, sorry. So my system is having problems because it's just messed up on my end. So help me with that if I'm on one versus the other. So what I'll do is hold on to this and pull the feather away. And I'll strip all of that off. And then I grab onto the tip and that will be my tie-in point. So I'll trim that. So I just have a tab. And now I'll switch over to the front, I hope. And what I like to do is fold that forward, use a little moisture on my thumb and forefinger, and hold it up and release the tension as I squeeze those fibers, and you'll notice that they're pointing backwards. So as I start to go around, make a really soft wrap and hold your breath so you don't pull that out. And then continue to wrap in front of the previous turn, pulling those fibers out of the way. And we will end right there. Place one wrap, and then I pull tightly, and I can release my hackle pliers and make a few additional securing wraps. We'll trim the tag in, and we'll make a nice little head here now. I'll end right at where the hackle is, and I'll flatten my thread. And we'll whip finish. and trim, and we're done. So there's just a classic, an old pattern. I like fishing the older patterns because I know that they work. Almost too pretty to fish, but we would fish that. Is a fly that I just wanted to share that it's a way to show how I tie some of the catskill patterns. So I would, first we'll talk about the material. So the hook is just a standard dry fly hook. I happen to be using an 1180, and I'll use the size 12. And orange Danville, 70 denier. I'll use some ginger hackle for the tail, probably a little bit of barred ginger. And for the body, I'll have some red fox, which I'll share. The wing is wood duck, and then a hackle of mixed grizzly and dark ginger. So I'm guessing that a lot of people don't have here's the fly that we'll tie. I'm guessing a lot of people don't have red fox in their fly tying material. If you would, you could substitute any dry fly dubbing for this particular fly, but I just wanted to go back to the original and just share some things. So I will put a hook in the vise, and hopefully you're looking at the front view. Is that right these days? Yay. Okay. So I'll start with some orange thread, and I will go down with touching turns. You can use whatever thread you want. So I will go back to about the 1/3 point, and that's where I'll put my wing. Now, I will tell you I am not an expert at catskill patterns or wings, but I just tie some of them, and I'll show you a couple of different techniques that work for me. Let me change to another view. And if I can, let me focus. So this is a box of wood duck that I have. And wood duck is very difficult to find, I think, these days. And what I've done is to prep these already by size. And so here's one, for example, that I have. Need to refocus 1 second. Nope. So this is how I prep my feathers, and you can notice how they're symmetrical. So what I want to show you is how I tie one of these that are not symmetrical, and then I'll finish the fly, and then I'll show you a different technique where you use two that are symmetrical. But I'm guessing that when most people, if they go to a fly shop, they will buy, if they do have any wood duck, there are going to be a lot of different styles of feathers. And so this is this is wood duck as well. And you notice that in that particular feather, let me grab another one right here. That if you're just tying a wing, you wouldn't be able to use this feather for that. What I would normally do is take two similar sized feathers, and I'll show you this technique in a minute, but I would put those together, and that's what would create my wing. But this is a different way to create a wing using a feather like this. So what I've done here is to take that feather, and I will use this side of it, the left-hand side, and I'm pulling these fibers out so they're all equal. And I have 2 of those feathers because of the quantity of material that I want to use. And I'm just going to match them for length. And you can use your thumb and forefinger to just adjust them so they're pretty similar. And I will tell you that when you first probably tie these, they're not going to turn out. And I would tell you, don't get discouraged. Just try a few of them, and they will get better as you try. So I will grab those. And we'll pull the material away. And those are not perfectly aligned, but they're close enough. Remember, this is a fishing fly. It isn't going to go on a plate. And I hope you're looking at the side view right now. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll put those so they're just one bundle, and the measurement is going to be the shank of the hook. So I'm going to use my scissors a lot when I measure these. So I'm looking at a spot right here, and I will reposition and make a soft wrap, pull up, and I'll continue down, holding up on the butt end, and I'll cut this at an angle. And I will measure my wing and make sure it's where I want it. And continue down to bind those fibers down. Come back up right behind the wing. Flatten my thread. And remember how I tied this. This is sitting up on top of the hook. I'll pull those fibers upward and now make some wraps. I go forward and back. So what I'm trying to do is build a little bit of a dam to hold these up, but in addition, I'm trying to make sure that I have somewhat of a ramp, so when I tie the hackle in at the very end, that it isn't going to jump around on me. So I'll do that a couple of times. And you notice how I put my thread. I'm tying it at an angle. And that should keep those fibers pretty much upright. I will try to separate these in half. And this is where my friend Al would say if they're not exactly in half, you trim them out the excess. Right? And what I'll do then is to create, try to get my hand out of there, I'm sorry, is create some X wrap, crisscross, I make 2 wraps there. And they're a little bit splayed, but that's okay. I like to have flat thread, and then what I will do is go around the base of the wing. And as I come back, I can adjust with tension where, so you notice how this side is moving somewhat. I'll make 1 more wrap and do the same on this side. So I'll hold the fiber. There's a couple of wraps, and that does 2 things. It bunches those fibers upward, but I'm also can adjust where I want that wing by the amount of tension that I provide. So I've got some split wings there. If you want those closer together, you could put another wrap or 2 towards the tip, but I think that'll be fine for right there. I'll go down to where the ramp is, and that's where I'll tie my tail. So this is I'll go to the front view now. This is some barred ginger. And what I've done is just to take a I've just taken a feather from the very top of this is the small side for where all the small feathers are, and it gets bigger. And right, if you turn this over, you'll find the likelihood of the longer fibers on these long hackles at the very tip. So that's what I'm using. And I will pull these fibers outward to align them again. Align the tips. I'll grab a hold of them and pull the feather away. I come in here and tie it in an angle, and I've measured it so it's about the length of the body, and I'm tying it in on my side, and then thread torque will bring it on top. There's one wrap, and this is where I measure it. So I take my scissors, that's the body length, and that's where the one end of my scissors is right above the barb, and the other is that's probably just a tiny bit longer, but in this fly that's absolutely fine. So I'll continue. I'll hold up the fibers to keep them on top, and I'm just taking touching turns. I'll go down right to where the barb is. I'll trim. And what this has done is to help fill in the taper. And this is some red fox. So you'll notice it has some guard hairs on it. But the color that we're looking for is this brownish gray. And you can just trim some of these fibers off. And I've already done that. And you'll see how long these are. And that'll be fine. What I've done is to pull the guard hair out, so I just have this dubbing left. And I'll use a little moisture, and I will dub a little bit at a time. You notice how long these are. As I mentioned earlier, if you want to use a different, you don't have any red fox, that's not a big deal. That's what the original pattern called for. But any dry fly dubbing will work. We're just creating a March brown dry fly. And sometimes this orange thread will shine through a little bit, but I think that's absolutely fine. I'm just creating a little bit of a taper. And I'm about at the 50% mark, maybe just a tad bit longer. And we will add the hackle now. So this is some grizzly hackle. This will be a mixture. You can see I've already prepped the feather. I like to tie it in with one wrap on top and one behind to try to lock it in. I'll go back to the tie-in point and tie on the second hackle, which is a ginger. And I have the shiny side facing forward. So we'll place one wrap over the top, one behind, and move forward. Now remember the ramp that I talked about? I'm going to place a few more thread wraps in here because the diameter in the back of the wing is higher than the front. And I found as I start to wrap the hackle, that the hackle will jump sometimes forward without that additional ramp. So I'll pull these wings out of the way, and I'll go forward, back, creating that ramp, and leaving it at the tie-off point. Now I tied in the grizzly first, so that will be the last one that I wrap. So I will place a few wraps. And I'm not making them wraps tight to each other. I like to tie off my hackle on top, so as I bring my thread up, I pull the hackle a little bit, and that creates a little bit of an opening so I'm not binding down as many of those fibers. I'll place 3 wraps on it, one in front again, just so I don't lose it. And now I will finish by placing a few wraps of the grizzly, and I will go back and forth. And I'll finish again, pull the fiber or the hackle forward. Flatten my thread, pull all the hackle out of the way, and we'll make a head. flatten the thread and make a whip finish. Now, when I first started tying these several years ago, I was always concerned about the length of the wing and the hackle, and so when I measured this hackle, it was a size 12, so it should be 1.5 times the gape of the hook, and the hackle, the wings should be high enough so they're a little bit longer than what the hackle is. And I will tell you, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. You need, this one is a little bit closer than what I like. This other fly shows that the wing is more prominent. But I'll tell you, this is the 4th fly that I've tied in a month. And I was happy that it didn't explode on me for tying these flies. So that's the Flicks March Brown. But I want to show you the other technique of attaching the wing. Again, I will just make touching turns going down halfway and then back to the 1/3 mark. And I'm not going to tie a whole fly, I'm just going to prep the wings and we'll be done. So as I mentioned earlier, I've got these feathers that I have prepped and they're ready to tie in. So let me change camera angles again so you can see what I'll do. I want to put these back to back so that the wing is already starting. I will align the tips and then start to pull fibers back, and this will kind of tell me how much of the wing material I have. So what I plan to do is tie them in like this. Yeah, that's a good question. So I said that the length of the body is what I'm using. And so the amount of wing material on each side is what I'm trying to adjust right now. So if I want a little less, I'll continue to take these fibers down. But let's tie that in and see what it looks like. So I'll pull these fibers and here I'm measuring. So this distance right here with my scissors is the length of the body. So I'm judging right here where my thumbnail is, and I'm going to reposition right where the thread. And you can tell that those fibers are sticking away from each other. I have flat thread, and when I bring it up, I'll make a wrap, and you notice that it twisted slightly, but that's okay. I'll just bring it back so those fibers are directly on top of the hook. And now I'll tighten it down. And we'll let that go. This is a time when I can measure. And those might look a little short now. So let's say they are, so I can go backwards, readjust, And I'll say those are fine for right now, so I'll bind down the butt ends and trim at an angle. I'll continue to bind the butt ends down and then go back up right behind the wing. We'll pull those up. Use my thumbnail to kind of force it. Oops. And I'm building that thread dam. And you'll notice that there's a natural break here. And the technique I used where I put them both together and then pulled the material out guarantees that I have the same amount of fibers on each side. And I'll use some crisscrossing wraps to make sure that they stay apart. I'll do 2 on that side, 2 on the other side. And now I will make a few wraps around the fibers, and that's just going to get them so they come together. I'll go back down and make a wrap around, and I can pull the thread, and that will kind of align some of that so it creates, I'm trying to fold it up, so I've moved this side of the wing was laying closer to me, and so I've had it more upright. And we'll do the same with the other side then. So there's 3 wraps. I'll go back down and I can pull on the wing. And that's how I would tie using that. Now, why would I use one technique versus the other? You'll see I've got one wild one there. It depends on the size of fly that you're tying. So on size 12s and larger, I like to use 1 whole feather on each side, as long as I have matching feathers. If I don't have that, then I use that technique that I showed to begin with, which allows you to use your wood duck. So wood duck might be hard for you to find, and you never want to throw away good wood duck. So this is the waist of these wings. And so what I would do with this would make a great shell back for a fly. So I'll save those. I'll put them in my box over here. And if I need wood duck for a tail or for a back, a thorax area, something like that, then I use these, quote, waist hackles in order to get the fiber off of that. So that's how to use wood duck.